More protests and more repression in the capital of Chile as demonstrators insist the president resign. Evo Morales laments opposition attempts to stage a coup as thousands turn out to defend Bolivia's democracy. Thousands of South Africans turn up at Johannesburg to welcome the victorious national rugby team. Hello and welcome to Telesur English. I am Estefania Bravo and this is From the South. We begin in Chile, where protesters are back on the streets of Santiago as demonstrations against the neoliberal system are in their third week. Police have again used a tear gas and water cannon against the demonstrators in Plaza Italia. In the morning, President Sebastián Piñera repeated that he would not resign, but said he was already seeking dialogue and was open to reforming the constitution. However, the protesters insist that President must go and a constituent assembly is needed to draw up sweeping changes to Chile's political and economic system. Official figures put the numbers killed in the protests with at least 18 and 7,000 arrested, but human rights organizations report higher figures. Women have been playing a critical role in Chile's protests against the government and have suffered from some of the most brutal repressive tactics, including violence and sexual abuse. Early on Tuesday, a number of prominent women from left-wing movements delivered a letter to the Chile's Minister for Women, Isabel Pla, condemning her silence on human rights in the country.
We women are tired of having a selective ministry at the time when we need to speak up. We also demand that the cases of violence against women by the government officials are followed up. This is what we want. There have been cases of abuse, torture, and threats.
Santiago and other cities and towns across Chile overflowed with protests on Monday. Alejandro Kirk reports.
And there were millions of them resisting. From here, Plaza Italia, this avenue of popular struggle, the influence spreads like water into every corner of the country. No one is untouched by this tornado. Now in its third week, Chile's October insurrection is seeking its bearings. The enemy has all the power. The movement knows where it wants to go, but isn't sure how to get there.
This is not going to fade away. This is the hope that the people are showing on the streets. We are more hopeful than ever. Our hearts are full with the hope of building a Chile with dignity.
Equality, equality for the people. We have had enough of inequality in education, in the health system, in social security and water access. Give us back equality. All Chile is here and the TV doesn't show it.
The main solution here has to be a constituent assembly to draw up a new constitution, because the one we have was written by the military behind closed doors in the 80s. The people know what they want. They need to be listened to.
The government is moving its pawns, with a citizen dialogue, with the official opposition, with a plebiscite.
A referendum for a new constitution. We think that is fundamental, and the population should have their say.
As
Government, we have said that we have launched a broad participatory process of dialogue. This is underway, and we think this has to happen before any final decisions can be taken.
The missing phrase is the one millions are chanting on the streets, constituent assembly, the ogre feared by those in power.
The demand from the thousands of popular assemblies held throughout Chile is for a constituent assembly. People have understood what this means. People have understood that as long as we have a constitution that defends private property and private interests over and above any social interest, there is no possibility of real change. What is the strategy of the government? To try to insist that this is all spontaneous, that there is no organization, that these demands don't amount to anything. That's a lie. The synthesis of these 2.5 million people who have protested across the country is a series of demands that each of the different sectors have been developing.
This isn't new. We have been saying for a long time that Chile needs change, and now the majority are saying it too.
While it talks about dialogue, the government attacks with no restraint. An international scandal that brought human rights observers to Chile, led by the Nobel Peace Laureate Rigoberta Menchú, who delivered a letter to Sebastián Piñera at the Moneda Palace.
There is total repression in all of Chile. This is clear, and it didn't just happen now. It comes from a long way back. So we think this repression is systematic.
There's a perception in society that there have not been reforms since the Pinochet laws, either in terms of human rights or in the role of the security forces. In Guatemala, we have tried to lay out a new role for the security forces in a democratic society after the end of the armed conflict. So I am surprised that these reforms have not happened in Chile.
This avenue where the people meet, march and resist is where President Salvador Allende held his swearing in on November the 4th, 1970. The avenue does not forget.
Thousands of miners, campesinos and others gathered in Bolivia to defend President Evo Morales' election victory and oppose what they see as an attempted coup by the opposition. The government insists it is open to dialogue, but that the opposition has refused.
When the people organize as a political instrument for liberation, and we guarantee not only economic, social and political stability, but also continuity, they accuse us of being authoritarian or a dictatorship. And when they cannot win the elections, they invent the idea that there was fraud. But we know this is not about fraud. There was no fraud. This is an attempt at a coup that we are facing. On the 20th of October this year, the People's Program won in the first round of the elections. This showed the awareness of the Bolivian people. Not to recognize that is anti-democratic. So, sisters and brothers, what does it mean to defend the process of change? It means defending social policies, defending our economic policies like nationalization, and ensuring basic services as a human right for all of us.
Earlier in the day, Bolivian social and civil organizations mobilized to block the opposition leader, Luis Fernando Camacho, from entering La Paz to demand the resignation of President Morales. The Minister of Government, Carlos Romero, said the president of the Santa Cruz Civic Committee flew back to Santa Cruz after a few hours at the airport because the crowds prevented him from going into La Paz. Camacho's arrival caused confusion and exposed him as a leader of the movement seeking to destabilize the government of President Evo Morales. He insulted security officials at the airport who sought to ensure his safety during the incident. As protesters gathered at the international airport of El Alto to prevent the arrival of Luis Camacho, the Red Ponchos movement demanded he surrender to explain his racist actions.
We as people from Amasillos came here to take him to our province, but unfortunately Camacho has escaped. We wanted him to surrender because he has done a lot of bad things to our sisters and brothers. He is treating us badly, so we want him to surrender to us. We are here in El Alto, marching to support our president.
Moving on, a former member of Ecuador's National Assembly, Virgilio Hernandez, has presented himself at a court hearing. His house was raided by the police just as the national strike against President Lenín Moreno's austerity measures ended in victory. Hernandez denies allegations that he and other supporters of the former president, Rafael Correa, instigated the protest. The accusation has also been ridiculed by indigenous and other protesters. Our correspondent, Denise Herrera, has the details.
Good afternoon. We are at the Pichincha Province Court in Quito, where recently the hearing against the leader of the Citizen Revolution movement, Virgilio Hernandez, one of the main leaders of the Citizen Revolution movement, just started. Virgilio just arrived at this court. He says that this hearing is a political persecution against the leader and the main leaders of the movement. He rejected all the allegations against him and the other leaders who also are in investigation after the massive demonstrations against the economic measures announced by the government. Until now, we don't have a recent update about the hearings, but we know that the hearing started and it's expected that today the court will decide the future of the leader of the Citizen Revolution movement, Virgilio Hernandez.
Virgilio Hernandez spoke about his case before entering the court.
There is no reason to impose other precautionary measures. Let's see if justice or hate will prevail today, but this is obviously a case of political persecution. They seek revenge. They basically want to silence us, the opposition. That's why we came here, strongly believing in our innocence, and yet we are being persecuted for being the opposition.
His daughter also spoke about the situation.
He has the right to defend himself as a free man according to the Constitution. This is obviously a political persecution of the opposition. I believe that this is not acceptable, that in a democratic country, all the opposition is in prison. We, as his family, have also suffered. Not only Virgilio, my father, suffered, but me as well, and my grandparents too, and also my little brother, who is only 14 years old.
Coming up after the break, Antigua and Barbuda becomes the newest member of the ALBA Bank. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Jamaican Prime Minister Andrew Holness and Chinese President Xi Jinping have agreed to lift their countries' relations from a friendly to a strategic partnership. Both leaders made the commitment when they met in Shanghai, where they expressed interest in deepening bilateral cooperation in the future. Prime Minister Holness is there to attend the second China International Import Expo that opened earlier on Tuesday. Jamaica is seeking to promote further cooperation in jointly building the China Proposed Belt and Road Initiative, which the Caribbean country signed on to in 2017. The Caribbean Community CARICOM is offering to facilitate constructive dialogue between political parties in Haiti towards a peaceful resolution to the current crisis. Chair of the regional bloc, Alan Chasnais, says the community is saddened and concerned about Haiti's increasing death toll and the escalating tensions. Over the past 7 weeks, crippling fuel and food shortages, as well as corruption allegations, have sparked mass demonstrations on the island. CARICOM says while it fully supports the enjoyment of the right to protest, it urges that this is done in a lawful manner. The community therefore calls on all parties to refrain from any further action that would hinder the peaceful resolution of the differences. Antigua and Barbuda's Prime Minister has renewed calls for Harvard University to provide reparations to the nation. Some Antiguan nationals are descendants of slaves that were owned by a family whose 18th century donation Harvard used to establish its first law professorship in 1815. In a letter to Harvard President Dr. Lawrence Bacot, Prime Minister Gaston Brown lamented that this is the third communique to his office in 2016, in 2018, and now in 2019. He criticized the university's capitalization of slave labor for Harvard's Royal Professorship of Law, which still exists to date.
Thank you very much.
And Antigua and Barbuda has become the newest member of the ALBA Bank. Antigua and Barbuda is the 7th country to join the bank, alongside Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua, Bolivia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and the Dominican Republic. Prime Minister Gaston Brown was in Caracas to sign the inclusion of his country. As its first agreement, the bank made a loan of over $15 million to be invested in the regional airline Liat to enhance its role in the Eastern Caribbean economy.
Prime Minister Gaston Brown formalized his accession to the ALBA Bank. We had a very productive meeting. We continue to work on regional integration and continue to work on the mandates we have since our founding agreement, which is to leverage large projects of social development with great impact on regional integration.
The ALBA Bank is a very important institution for the region.
El Banco del ALBA es una institución esencial para nuestra región.
It was formed through the bold leadership of your late commander, Hugo Chavez Reyes.
Y la razón que hoy que existe este banco fue por la visión del gran líder que fue Hugo Chávez Frías.
And I extend gratitude on behalf of the people of Antigua and Barbuda and the general Caribbean region for the foresight of your late commander.
A number of world governments have expressed regret at the decision by the U.S. government to withdraw from the Paris Climate Agreement. China called the move unfortunate.
The Chinese side expresses regret that the US officially launched the relevant procedures for withdrawing from the Paris Agreement. We believe that climate change is a common challenge faced by all of mankind. All members of international society should work together hand in hand, and each do their best to respond together.
Our correspondent in Washington, D.C., Jorge Gestoso, says the decision to leave the Paris Accord will have an impact on U.S. elections.
The issue of climate change is playing a central role in the campaigns ahead of next year's elections in the United States. In fact, this process of leaving the Paris Climate Accord will culminate just one day after the presidential elections are held on November the 3rd next year. As you know, the progressive Democratic Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, along with Senator Bernie Sanders, who is one of the top 3 contenders for the Democratic Party nomination, have launched the Green New Deal as a major plank of their campaign. This is a plan to tackle climate change, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and promote what they call clean development using wind power and other clean energy sources. So what the Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is saying when he refers to the responsible attitude of the United States seems to fly in the face of reality, because the facts show that since Donald Trump became president, he has set about systematically eliminating all the environmental regulations and protections that existed. For example, he's favored the highly contaminating coal industry, supposedly to create jobs, even though clean energies create many more jobs than coal does. Statistics show that the United States is responsible for about 20% of all the world's CO2 emissions. Yet the US is one of only 3 countries that's refusing to sign the Paris Agreement. Now, all 3 of the main contenders for the Democratic presidential nomination, Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, and Elizabeth Warren, have taken up this issue. So if any of them were to beat President Trump in next year's election, we could expect the United States to return to the Paris Climate Accord.
We thank Jorge Gestoso for that report. The Yemeni government has signed a power-sharing deal with southern separatists. The deal, brokered by Saudi Arabia, is aimed at ending a conflict simmering within the country's civil war. The agreement will see the secessionist Southern Transitional Council handed a number of ministries and also the return of the government to the southern city of Aden. According to a recent report, the war in Yemen has claimed almost 100,000 lives since it started in 2015.
This agreement will open the door to future agreements with the Yemeni factions, so we can reach a political agreement that will end the crisis and will protect and fortify Yemen from anyone that does not have the best interest for Yemen and its various factions.
Russian and Turkish armored patrol vehicles have been met with protests and resistance from Syrian Kurds near the border town of Kobani. The people threw stones at the trucks to protest against a second joint Russian-Turkish ground patrol. The patrols are aimed at ensuring the withdrawal of the Kurdish People's Protection Unit under an agreement reached on October 22nd with Russia and Turkey. Coming up after the break, thousands of South Africans take to the airport to welcome the national rugby team. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Thousands of South Africans have turned up at the Johannesburg OR Tambo International to welcome the victorious national rugby team. The international arrivals area of the airport was awash with the green and gold colors of the team, fondly known as the Springboks. South Africa won its 3rd Rugby World Cup trophy on Sunday after they beat England 32-12 at a final played at Tokyo's Yokohama Stadium. For more on the Springboks' return, we have a report from our correspondent in Pretoria, Matuba Malachi.
With the team now on home soil, there will be no rest for the Springboks, as they will have to do a 5-day tour that will tour 5 major cities. And the irony in all of that is that most of the Springbok players come from the rural areas of South Africa. So rural areas of this country are the breadbasket of our sportsmen, especially in the rugby team. So Heroes Welcome has been now set up at the OR Tambo International Airport, where they will arrive in 2 flights. The other one arrived early and the other one will arrive later because of the logistics that come with traveling from Asia. And so President Cyril Ramaphosa has been asking the country and everybody to rally behind the Springboks to show them support for the victory they've done in Japan. And also, South Africa is actually a very strange country if you don't understand the politics, because the victory of the Springboks has somehow divided the country, some calling it a unifying act, some calling it nothing but just a victory which does not do anything to the politics of the country. But for the coming days, with the tours that are coming, with the return of the Springboks, we will see South Africans rally behind the team, and it will show itself whether this is an act that will unite a very polarized country racially, because Springboks has a history of being a very white Afrikaans sport here in South Africa. But now, in post-apartheid 2019, we see it as a unifier of the nation. It's back to you, studio.
The South African economy has suffered one of its worst downturns in the past few years. According to the government, the unemployment rate has reached almost 30%, the highest the country has ever experienced. Our correspondent has the story.
South Africa prides itself as the most industrialized economy on the African continent, but it's also an economy that hasn't seen significant growth since 2008. Government is bleeding money while trying to save state-owned companies, most of whom have been run to the ground by corruption. Speaking to the country's national broadcaster, the statistician general painted a bleak picture.
The number of unemployed people in South Africa is sitting at 6.7 million. The only difference is that as of the last quarter, the increase on unemployment has been by about 62,000 persons quarter on quarter. But the unemployment rate went up to 29.1%. Now, obviously, since 2008, unemployment has been rising steadily, coming out of the mid-20s and now sitting at 29.1%.
President Cyril Ramaphosa and his executive are under pressure to come up with a turnaround strategy that will stabilize the economy and create jobs. Rating agency Moody's says South Africa has 3 months to improve or face being downgraded to junk status. Ramaphosa chaired the first meeting of the Presidential Economic Advisory Council as one of his attempts to revive the economy.
Our economy has lost its competitiveness, ranking 82nd among 190 countries in the World Bank's Ease of Doing Business Index. Business confidence has reached historic lows.
There's no quick fix solution to the current state of the economy. Most of it blamed on massive corruption with a price of billions of dollars.
So it is for the Ramaphosa administration really to change the whole culture within the economy, because state capture dependent on cooperation by the private sector also. And the public sector.
While there's no promise of an improved economy anytime soon, in the meantime, ordinary South Africans can only wait to see if any of the initiatives will translate into job opportunities. Matuba Mahlachi, Telesur, Pretoria in South Africa.
A huge fire in Nigeria has ripped through a popular market in Lagos. The fire started in the morning with thick black smoke and flames shooting up from many 5-story buildings surrounding the market. No deaths or injuries have been reported so far, but many properties were damaged. The authorities are yet to determine the cause of the fire. Zambia aims to develop honey export in an attempt to diversify its economy and tackle poverty. Zambia is known to be the second largest cooper producer on the African continent, but the country has been trying to expand exports beyond the metal. Currently, Zambia produces 2,000 tons of honey per year, but the production is set to grow to over 10,000 tons soon because of increased exports, with over 30,000 rural beekeepers propelling the industry.
We have been known to be copper producers, for centuries. Now we want to diversify and go into other industries. Honey exports can be a key component in the growth of the economy and fight against poverty in Zambia through job and wealth creation.
With that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, find them on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Until next time.